Hey guys, Coach JZ here, and thank you for joining me in this week's Masterclass. Today we're going to be talking about tempo lifting, or the use of tempo during resistance exercises for lifetime athletes. Now, many of you are probably already familiar with this term, and you know that we use many advanced techniques or concepts in our training here at the Lifetime Athlete, and especially in our training tribe programming that's based on the annual training plan year-round, balancing those 5 elements of strength, speed, power, agility, and endurance. But we also will use tempo to describe submaximal sprint speed as well as training around the lactate threshold. But today we're talking about tempo in the gym during these resistance exercises and lifts. Well, essentially all tempo is the rhythm or cadence of exercises. So that's the timing which we move through those motions with. There are 4 phases, and the way we look at it here at TLA, you can break an exercise of almost anyone into 4 phases. There is an initial phase or range of motion, so that's going from, if we just use a curl as an example, that's going from the start position, or excuse me, I should be down here, the start position. This is the initial range of motion. Then we have a hold or a knot. So sometimes we will do a hold or an isometric squeeze in an exercise. So that's a phase. Then we've got the return range of motion. So now we're going back. And then finally we have a pause or knot. So in other words, is the tempo that we're using requiring us to wait momentarily before beginning the next repetition? All of those things can apply. Now how we set that up, we look at the 4 phases always in that order. Goes from initial, hold, return, and pause, and this is expressed as a count. So the count's not full seconds, not like 1,001, 1,002. It's more like 1, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing. Easier to do when you're training. And so we express the tempo for different exercises based on 4 numbers, usually separated by dashes. So if we just go right into talking about some examples, I'm going to use the squat as an example. You can use a bench press in the same manner. Those are exercises that start in an extended position. This also works for other exercises like deadlift, although we have to think about how each exercise is performed, where those phases lie. Well, anyway, let's get right to it. If we do what's oftentimes looked at as a traditional rhythm or cadence with the exercise, that's going to be a count of roughly 4, 1, 3, 2, give or take. And so this is very traditional for resistance training. So if I'm using the squat example as I am here, that might be descending on a 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got a 1 second pause or reversal, and then I come up about a 1, 2, 3 against gravity. And then maybe there's a 1, 2 pause before beginning the next repetition. Works great. And certainly during most of our resistance training and when we're using heavy loads, this is probably the desired rhythm that we're going to choose. But let's say we want to do something else. What if we want to work on time under tension, just increasing load on a muscle without having as much weight? So we're creating mechanical tension and prolonging that time. Well, that might look like 8, 8, 6, 2 as one example. So if I'm using that squat, going down on an 8 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and then coming back, holding for 8 at the bottom to again absorb more tension, have some isometric time there, and then we come up slow, but not quite as slow, and then there's a short pause. Great system there. Now we've got a fast concentric, and so that would be where we're trying to come up strong. So this might not be done with the fullest range of motion or the heaviest of loads. Again, it depends on what we're training for. I'm going to mention that in a moment. But that would be a 3, 0, 1, 3. Down on 3, no pause, so it's an instantaneous reversal. Get that stretch reflex, and then come up fast on 1. Wait 3 before beginning the next rep. The last one I'll do as an example here is a fast eccentric. Sometimes we want to do kind of like a snap down. So we just drop quickly, and then we'll pause, come up slow, and also wait just a moment before beginning the next repetition. All of these are not written in stone. They're just examples of how we can explore and experiment with tempo and get some amazing results. And like I alluded to before, we have to think about each exercise, what we're trying to accomplish with the tempo, and therefore how much range of motion or loading we might use. We might not always choose heaviest of weights or full range of motion, and that's just a part of being a very creative coach and trainer. Now, think about also the start position of the exercise. I did that curl example, so that's one where we're starting essentially in an extended position and we're flexing up. So it's very similar to how the squat and bench press works. But if you're doing a deadlift, a traditional one, not necessarily a Romanian deadlift, a traditional deadlift starts on the floor. So that first phase is going to be your concentric phase, opposite of the squat, which the first phase was the eccentric phase. So that's what I'm here for, to help you coach you through all these things. But nonetheless, I'm thinking about that, and if you're just keeping that in mind, that's great. Now, finally, we can look at what happens. Well, when we do this, we change the stimulus, and so in many ways, that's great for our bodies because it allows us to increase adaptations. We just get good at or better at moving in all sorts of manners, which is what life is. Life's not always in the same plane at the same speed. Also, this variety, it helps us, again, from a physical standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint. And that variety leads to consistency. In other words, the more we're having some fun and uniqueness and excitement in the workout, we're more likely to keep doing it. Now, I'm not saying we're changing it up all the time. I think we want to have periods of consistency with regard to exercise or what we're doing in a training block. But nonetheless, a little bit of variety with this tempo can be incredibly effective. Lastly, all of this leads us to becoming movement smiths. And those are those critters, those creatures, those beasts that own every position and who have mastery in every direction. And that's really a part of being an athlete for life. So tempo lifting for lifetime athletes. Thanks for joining me today.